Okay, picture this. The call comes in 3:47 a.m. You know, that hour when everything feels a little fragile. We've got a body, a room, a lock. Classic setup, right? But hold on. This case, it's different. The victim, not a person. It's an idea. And that locked room, well, that's the entire universe.
And get this. This is the note we find clutched in the victim's hand. It's our only lead, but man, it's also our biggest problem. It tells us two huge things. One, the victim knew exactly who did it. And two, naming the killer is apparently impossible. So our job? We have to invent a whole new language just to solve this thing.
All right, let's step inside the crime scene. We're at the apartment of a philosopher, a guy named Emile Voss. Now, at first glance, it looks totally ordinary, but it's not. You can feel it. The air is, well, it's thicker, like it's heavy with meaning. See, this room isn't just a room, it's a statement, it's an argument. And somehow, it's sealed in a way that just completely defies physics.
Okay, so here's the crucial thing you've got to understand. This whole setup, it's a giant metaphor. The dead philosopher, Emile Voss, he represents the murder of meaning itself. And the room, that's our universe. And the whole point is that it's a totally sealed system. Nothing from the outside can get in. So what does that mean? It means murder by an outside force isn't just unlikely, it's logically impossible.
So the lock on this room isn't made of steel, right? It's made from a pure concept, something called causal closure. The source material has this fantastic way of explaining it. Imagine a snow globe. Now, just for a second, get rid of the glass, the water, the tiny little houses, get rid of all of it, but keep that principle of self-containment. That's our room. It's not physically locked, it's logically sealed shut.
And this leads us to a pretty stunning conclusion. I mean, if nothing can get in from the outside, then the killer had to already be inside, right? And in a room that's a stand-in for the whole self-contained universe, there's really only one suspect whose very nature fits the description: God. The alibi is perfect. Why? Because the suspect is the room.
But wait a second. How do you actually build a lockout of logic? I mean, we're not talking about deadbolts and keyholes here. What someone did was they took a famous philosophical argument and they weaponized it. They didn't build a wall of bricks, they built a logical proof so airtight that reality itself couldn't find a way in.
And here's how it works. The mechanism is something called the ontological argument. It's this super old proof for God's existence, and it basically says God has to exist just by definition. It kind of goes like this. First, imagine the most perfect being possible. Got it? Okay. Now, wouldn't a being that actually exists be more perfect than one that doesn't? Of course. So, a non-existent perfect being, that's a contradiction in terms. Therefore, that perfect being must exist. See? It's this perfect, self-contained loop of logic.
And here is the big twist. The exact same logic that proves God has to exist was used to prove that this room has to exist as a sealed, self-contained system. The argument itself became the walls, the door, the whole lock. And that's what makes God our prime suspect, with probably the most brilliant alibi of all time. The murder weapon is the very proof of his own existence.
But, you know, every perfect alibi has a crack in it somewhere. And to find it, we've got to go deep. We're heading into the philosophical underground, a world of black market thinkers and concept hitmen. Down here, ideas aren't just, well, ideas. They're weapons, they're tools, they're contraband. And just like any weapon, they leave behind clues.
Okay, clue number 1. It comes from the legendary philosopher Immanuel Kant. He actually found a kind of back door in this argument centuries ago. His point was simple but brilliant. He said, hey, existence isn't a property. It's not like being all-powerful or all-knowing or blue. You can't just add existence to a concept to make it real. You can't define something into being. And that critique, that's not just a philosophical jab. It's a flaw in the lock. It's our way in.
And check this out. That abstract logical flaw, it shows up physically at the crime scene. Reflected in a window, there's a shadow with nothing casting it. Now, in a perfectly causally closed room, that's impossible. It can't happen. This shadow, it's the Kantian exception made real. It's the one tiny point of contact between the killer's airtight logic and the messy reality it was trying to shut out. It is the back door.
So we take this to an informant, a pro-concept hitman they call the deletion.
He takes one look at the philosophical signature, the specific intellectual moves behind the crime, and he confirms our suspicions. He says the evidence, the logic, the pure style of it all points to one client. And it looks like the case is closed.
He was wrong. Dead wrong. I mean, the fingerprints were there, the signature was a perfect match, but it wasn't God who signed on the dotted line. It was something else. Something that used God's signature. The whole alibi, it was a setup. Our prime suspect was framed.
So if God didn't do it, who did? The answer isn't a who, it's a what. The killer isn't some being you can slap handcuffs on. The killer is the very idea that stands in opposition to God. The murderer is a philosophical position that's been turned into a weapon.
Okay, look at this. This lays it all out. On one side, you've got the necessary being, right? God. Something that exists by its very definition. It has to be there. But on the other side, you have the force of contingency. That's the principle of pure accident, of groundlessness. It's the idea that things exist for no reason at all. Our killer isn't a being. It's the very concept of unnecessarity. And the motive is absolutely chilling. This killer isn't after money or revenge. It wants to prove a philosophical point. It wants to prove that if the universe is just one giant accident, if nothing has to be the way it is, then the whole idea of meaning just completely falls apart. In a world of pure accident, there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no justice, there's just stuff that happens. The goal wasn't to commit a crime, it was to erase the very concept of crime itself.
So let's be crystal clear about this. The killer is the abstract concept of groundlessness itself. It's the idea that there is no ultimate reason for anything. Some person or some force took that idea and decided to embody it, to turn the pure accident of existence into a program to be run, a weapon to be aimed right at the heart of meaning.
And all of this brings us right back to that note we found. The language I need hasn't been invented yet. You see, Emile Voss wasn't just murdered, he was silenced. He was this close to creating the one thing that could stop the killer, a language that could actually name it. This murder was all about preventing that language from ever being born.
So here's the problem Voss was wrestling with. Our language, the very way we think, traps us. It forces us to split the world into two things, subjects and their properties. The ball is red. The killer is evil. But what if the killer operates on a level before that split even happens? How in the world do you name something that exists before we even have the idea of things and their attributes?
And this is where his solution was so brilliant. Voss was designing a whole new grammar. So instead of squishing a subject and a predicate together, his language would keep them separate. You'd isolate the pure subject, just the raw thingness of a thing. Then you'd isolate a pure predicate, just an attribute floating free. And the meaning, it wouldn't come from mashing them together, it would come from the tension, the gap, the silent space between them.
When you really get down to it, this is the real crime. The killer's attack isn't just on logic, it's on connection itself. By tearing apart the shared rules that let our words mean something to each other, it isolates every single thought, every feeling. It doesn't break language, it makes language lonely. It leaves every word and every one of us totally alone.
And so, that's what we're left with. Our victim, Voss, died trying to build a new word for a new kind of terror. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other truths, what other dangers, or what other incredible beauties are out there right now, just waiting at the very edge of our vocabulary? What exists in those gaps that our current languages just can't cross yet?